You're listening to Kate Palmer from sparkletart.com, and today I'm going to show you one technique using Lindy's Stamp Gang sprays and some art squares, and I'm going to show you how to do it 3 different ways. I'm going to be using these cute little art squares from Inchy Arts. There's a couple of different sizes, and I'm going to use these as the base for my Lindy's Stamp Gang projects. For this project, you'll need to gather together your favourite Lindy's Stamp Gang Starburst spray colours and maybe even some flat Fabios, and of course you'll need a bottle of the new Lindy's Stamp Gang Purely White Embossing Powder. This stuff is fantastic. You might want 2 bottles. The steps for this technique are actually quite simple. I'm going to start by spraying one colour of Starburst sprays over my matte board background. Now, don't cover the whole thing, just add a little. For the second step, grab your next colour and colour any areas that are still white. You're not going to want to add more than 2 colours, otherwise in such a small space, this could get a little muddy. I'm creating 3 different panels at the same time, because you very rarely create one Christmas card, do you? So it's just as easy to do 3 all at once. I'm going to colour each panel differently to give you a few different ideas about how you can use this technique. One will be fun and funky with bright colours, another will be subtle and elegant, and the third will be more traditional colours. No, I don't mean green and red because that would go very badly together on this. Think more blues and silver kind of looks. Make sure to decorate each panel in a different way so that there's a bit of variation. On some of them I've sprayed the colour, on others I've dabbed it on with the dabber cap, and yet on others I've flicked it on for a more interesting freeform look. Now that you've sprayed your panels, you'll need to leave them to dry completely before the next step. If they're even the slightest bit damp, you can have your ink colours run, or your embossing powder stick to the whole panel, and believe me, that's not what you want. So set these aside for at least a few hours and wait till they're completely dry before continuing on. For this next step, I'm using some stamps from Flourishes. You could use anything you've got. I'm also using quite a few different ink pads. Now if you don't have all of these, just use whatever it is that you do have. They don't have to be archival, they don't have to be metallic. Just grab some coordinating colours and stamp some images. You're just trying to break up that background and make it look a little bit more interesting before the final step. At this point, I'm stamping tiny snowflakes with gold Delicata ink. Now this will look different on each panel, but it's well worth doing. Then what I'm going to do is go in with a few different archival inks and add a bit of colour. Again, these will look different on each panel, but they add a beautiful contrast to the sparkle. To finish it off, I'm using a little bit of the Brilliance ink in Moonlight White. Whilst not opaque, this again adds a different element. This is all just making these background panels a little more interesting. Now that you've got a little bit of pattern going on here, what I'd like you to do is grab a Versamark ink pad or any clear sticky ink pad, and we're going to stamp some snowflakes on top of our current pattern. Now the reason these are going to work so beautifully is my new secret weapon, and it's purely white embossing powder from Lindy's Stamp Gang. This stuff is super fine, super detailed and completely opaque, and I think I might be in love with it. Go ahead and repeat the same process on each panel. Stamp the snowflakes in Versamark, add the embossing powder, tip off the excess, and then set with an embossing tool. This will look great. To finish the panels off, take one of the ink pads you've used to stamp your images and just edge those panels. So what I mean by that is run that stamp pad along the edges. This will just help finish them off. While the actual panels are finished, I thought I'd give you a little bonus idea, just in case you're looking for a different way to use the panel on your cards. What you'll need to do is ink a stamp with Versamark ink, sounds familiar doesn't it, and stamp onto a pre-cut and pre-folded background. Coat these images in the purely white embossing powder from Lindy's Stamp Gang. Make sure that you've covered these really well because you're not going to get a second chance at this. Set the embossing powder with the heat gun and make sure that it's completely cooled before moving on to the next step. The final step to finish off this background is to go over those stamped images using the ink blending tool and a water-based ink. Don't use archival or India ink or anything permanent for this, as it will also colour the snowflakes, whereas the water-based ink, like a distress ink, as you can see here, will leave beautiful white snowflakes as the embossing powder creates a resist effect. This just gives you an extra thing that you can use to make your cards that little bit more special. And now for the finished cards. The first one I've kept quite simple. I've used 3 of the panels that I created with that Hottie Patootie Hot Pink and California Poppy Gold. I've laid them over some ribbon and I've stamped the word joy using the same ink as I used to stamp the images on the panels. I've then used the same spray that I used to colour them to just flick a few drops over the background. This is a bright and fun, funky card that is quick to make and still looks really cute. For my second card, I've gone the more elegant and sophisticated approach. There's a lot of silver sparkle on my background panel, so I've coordinated that panel with silver elements just to really bring it out. A sheer silver ribbon, the word joy stamped in silver, and some silver snowflake embellishments help bring all of this together. Now the other thing I've done is use 2 different coloured white panels on the background so that it really accentuates that central square. On this panel I'd used the Silent Night Silver and the Azure Sea Asters for the colour, with a little bit of Danny Zuko denim thrown in over the top. This third card is probably the fanciest of the bunch, although, as promised, these are all very simple to make and not at all time consuming. On this third card, the front panel and the base look quite similar, although, and you'll see this in a second, that front panel has the gorgeous shimmer from the Lindy Stamp Gang sprays, so when you tilt it, the base looks like it's a matte finish, and that beautiful shimmer on the front panel really stands out. On this one, I wanted to make it so that it was coordinated and a little bit fancier, so I've added a piece of ribbon, a coloured timber word, and a little snowflake embellishment that is covered in Stickles glitter, just for something a bit different. Again, this one's probably a bit more on the elegant traditional Christmas side, with the colours for this one being the Tiffany Lou Blue and the Teapot Purple, 2 of my favourites. I think all of these panels, even though they're created with the same technique, have turned out very unique and quite individual. I hope I've given you a few ideas for this year's Christmas cards, and that you may have either discovered a new technique or rediscovered an old one. This has been Kate Palmer for Lindy Stamp Gang. Bye!